Cool. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Philosophy Roulette number 232, where I read and review philosophy papers live on the air for the live Twitch audience and later on YouTube. Although I need to upload some stuff I have some back catalog I gotta upload to YouTube. So normally what I do is just look at all the new journal articles forthcoming. And so we've got lots of nice stuff. We've got our Kentness, Australasian Journal of Philosophy, Mind, Public Affairs, cool things. Isn't these? Non-standard approaches to emergence, good stuff. Phenomenal roles, dispositional account of bodily pain. So let's just go see if this is here. I just want to take a look at this real quick. AJP, Joachim Horvath and Alex Weigman. Yeah, well, maybe it's here. Intuitive expertise. Psi archive. Cool. I didn't know there was a Psi archive. Let's just see what happens if I open it with the Firefox right here. Preprint. 32 pages. But double spaced. Hey, that's kind of cool. So that's like 16 pages. This is doable. So this is an idea. Could do this. I also have a paper I'm thinking about doing that was a request. So I'm going to look around, see what's available. If Semiotics shows up, might do that too. So we've got this. Don't need this one here. So that's an interesting thing. And we got against methodological gambling. I mean, what does that even mean? You should rely on methodological triangulation. I mean, is there non-methodological triangulation? Alright, so that one didn't show up. Let's see what happens when I click on it. Oh wow, it's so early they don't even have a link yet. Okay. So it's just a placeholder. This is a book review, but we can look at Mind. I haven't looked at Mind in a while. Recent works. This is a review. Critically discuss some English language books. Yes, this is a book review. Objective value is always Newcombizable. The Newcomb problem. Let's see. Is that 40? No, it's like 35 pages. Some of these things are beasts. I mean, this is all 37 pages. Wow. Valpo, you don't mind? It's just, I actually find it very hard to find anything worth reading in Mind because it's a lot of their papers are just long, and I can't find anything short. Like this one here is short. So let's see, the significance of new logic. Yeah, but this is a book review. That's all it is. So, I, in some sense, Valpo, and welcome. I hope you're having a good day. It's all the same to me. I don't care. It's all good. It's all bad. It's all good. It's all sort of flat. Let's see. I mean, this is 20 pages, 21. It's not like everything that's not like super long is always a book review in Mind. So, I don't know. Do you have a suggestion? Do you want me to read something? I mean, I don't know if you were here a minute ago. We've got this intuitive expertise in moral judgments, and that's in the Australasian Journal of Philosophy. Now I'm just looking at Mind. And I also have a aesthetics paper I might do. Fiction, Nonfiction, and Deceptive Photographic Representations. And that's in the Journal of Aesthetics and Art Criticism, and that's for Semiotics, who I hope will stop by today, but I don't know. So I was just like looking around, seeing what was available. Book review. On the possibility of hallucinations. How is it impossible to have hallucinations? Do you need 31 pages to tell me that hallucinations are possible? I mean, is that really something that we need to have 31 pages discussing? I mean, I guess so. Book review from paradigm-based explanation to pragmatic genealogy. Look at this download count. Look at that. That's 1,094 downloads on this. Is this person like popular? Matthew Kalos. I don't know. I apologize for how I'm saying your name. And this is 30 something pages, maybe 40 pages. Yeah, 41. 31. It's kind of amazing. Yeah, tell me if you have a preference. I don't have to look at Mind. I can look at someplace else. Self-locating belief in updating on learning. Did I read this one already? I might have, because it's short. It's 5 pages. Some sort of base. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I looked at these. The Gatecrasher Paradox. I remember this now. Oh man, if it was here, I'm almost certain I read it. The worst part about this is, I can't even remember if I read these things anymore. I think I didn't read this. It was actually kind of cool. It's a 5-page paper in Mind. So I know they do publish very short papers, but I've never actually seen one before. So you know what? I'm going to save this because that's really cool that it's available now. I don't know if it was available last time I looked. Let's see. Yeah, and then these are all reviews. Unable to do the impossible. Well, is that surprising also? That, like, if it's impossible, you can't do it? Tough questions. 17 pages, though. Alright, I'm sick of Mind. Let's move on. I no longer can handle it. Let's see. Philosophy and public affairs. I have not done any public affair philosophy in a while. So let's see. What do we got? You see that? And here's the problem. Nothing is shorter than 16 pages in this whole, okay, there's only like 7 things. Let's try last year. Yeah, nothing is shorter than 16 pages in this entire journal. So that's a little scary. Synthes. I think did we just read something in Synthes? I could also do Utilitas if you want some consequentialism. Exercising abilities. I think I looked at this. I don't know. Find out what else we got. This is what we did last time. Vertical versus horizontal. But yeah, so let's see what this one is. According to one prominent view of exercising abilities. Whatever. Oh yeah, it was here. That's right. We were looking at these different things and we were deciding between the two of them. But yeah. Okay, cool. So if anyone has a preference to this, I think I'm just going to go do the cinesemiotics one. I mean, I've been sitting around just trying to figure out what to do, but I don't need to do any of these at the moment. And then we did this, and then this deflationism about truth is, that's available too, I think. But, let's see if there's anything else like just lying around that looks good. Experiencing moral properties. I think I've looked at all of those already, though. So these are old. Okay, so no more of that. Yeah, so if chat has an opinion, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to go do the aesthetics paper on fiction. Fiction, nonfiction, and deceptive practice or whatever. Pascal's mugger strikes again. What is that? Oh boy, Pascal's mugger. Huh. That sounds like fun. I mean, just got a good title. And it's here. I mean, this is definitely getting read. So, I mean, good on you, Dylan Balfour of the University of Edinburgh, for writing a paper that has a catchy title and is short. And that is how you get your stuff read nowadays. At least on Philosophy Roulette. Look at that. Easily available. Alright, so this is going to be coming up very shortly. But as it is right now, yeah, so let's move that one up the queue a little bit. I think we're just going to go to this one here. This is Fiction, Nonfiction, and Deceptive Photographic Representation. It's free, so you can just come to the website and grab it. Let's see, where is the... You know what? Here we go. there is the link. And so if you come into chat, you can grab the link by typing !paper. You can see it right here. And the link will pop back up. And you can get it. And then, of course, you just click on it and you'll come to here. And you can hit the download PDF button if you want to follow along. So let's also update the title. There we go. So I apologize for how I say everyone's names because I don't know who a Paloma is. Atencia Linares. I hope I'm saying that at least somewhat correctly. And I have this one already downloaded. So let's see. What are we doing? We are going here. Loading it up. And okay, so now we're off. Cool. And as always, chat, if you want to ask questions along the way, please do. This is my first time reading it. Just trying to figure it out. So, let's go. The relation between the photographic image and reality has arguably been the major concern of the vast bulk of the literature on photography, philosophical or otherwise, since the invention of the medium. This is understandable given that the very nature of photography has frequently been conceived as never less than the registering of an emanation, a material vestige of its subject. This intimate link between the image and the real has undoubtedly influenced the function photographs perform in our societies. As snapshots, photographs are records, accurate public memories of our family and social life. As legal or journalistic documents, they are reliable evidence of an event, playing the part of a public eye. However, more than a century and a half after the advent of photography, the functions, uses, and possibilities of the medium have diversified, and sometimes, pace the recommendations of the modernists, the search for realism or its exploitation has been completely abandoned. These non-realistic uses of photography have been well documented and studied by art historians and scholars from other disciplines. But they have received scarce attention from philosophers, many of whom still demonstrate a degree of skepticism about the possibility of non-realistic photographs in general and fictional ones in particular. I mean, I'm completely unfamiliar with this sort of terminology. What's a fictional photograph? I mean, there's staged photographs, there's photographs that are deceptive in some way, but I'm not even sure what the terminology is here. I mean, there's no reason to think that a photograph by, like, on its own is realistic. It's some sort of, inherent flattening of reality. So in some sense, it can't be a three-dimensional photograph. That's not what a photograph is, so it can't be reality. So it's not going to be realistic in that way. But what's it mean for it to be fictional at that point? I don't quite know. So I don't understand how the terms are being used in this paper already. And the funny part is, I think it's not even anything clever or interesting. I think this is just the state of the world at the moment. The author here is just using the terms as they are, and I'm realizing I actually don't know what's going on. So, for me not to know what's going on is normal, but not knowing this fast is... I usually at least kind of have some idea what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, continuing. In this article, I explore some issues regarding the fictional capacity of photographs and their classification as fiction or nonfiction. In particular, I address the debate on the purported fictional incompetence of photography, whether photographs can or cannot represent ficta. In this debate, I side with the theorists who defend the view that photographs can indeed represent fictive entities or ficta, but I also offer an alternative argument. I claim that photographs can indeed represent ficta by photographic means, something that most theorists have denied. Then I consider some possible objections to my view and try to offer responses. Finally, I question whether representing fictive entities or events is all that is needed for a photograph to be fictional. In this context, I suggest what I take to be the correct way to classify deceptive photographs. So I guess we're talking about photographs of Santa Claus. You can clearly go to a mall here in the US and photograph Santa Claus at Christmas time, because that's what people do here. They bring their kids to go sit on Santa's lap and get a photo for I have absolutely no idea why people do that, actually. I mean, I'm not Christian, so I never had that experience. But, like, I'm not even sure what the, the sort of motivation is there. I think it is kind of like a fun thing to do, but I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, the joke is, of course, that you're sitting your kid on some creepy guy's leg, and there's always the movie Bad Santa with Billy Bob Thornton. Yeah. So, who exactly are you dealing with when you're going to the mall? Okay, continuing. The debate on the fictional incompetence of photography. Photographs are frequently characterized in the philosophical literature as natural images. Alright, so already we're getting like buzzwords here. Natural images. I mean, what the heck is a natural image for that matter? Photographs, like shadows and fossils, bear a causal relationship to their content. What is seen in photographs depends causally and counterfactually on the object that was in front of the camera at the moment of the shoot. Well, isn't that the same for painting? I mean, even if you don't paint in a realistic manner, it's still whatever ends up on the canvas is still causally dependent on what like the artist was looking at. So again, this is very, very odd. Like the more I think about this. Okay, continuing. Moreover, the content of a photograph is not essentially dependent on the photographer's intentions. Paintings and drawings are different in this regard, for what we see in a painting is entirely dependent on the mind of the painter. You see, again, this is like setting this up, but I mean, this is sort of like the way things are. I'm not entirely sure paintings and drawings are different in the sense that it's completely intentional. Okay. Photographs, unlike paintings, are therefore visual traces of the objects that were in front of the lens when the photograph was shot. I mean, in some sense, of course they are, but like there is more to it, and the same thing with paintings. Paintings are not just the emanations from like the artist's brain that came from nowhere. It had to have some sort of input. I mean, that's why there's usually models and stuff in painting. Like you have some little setup of a still life or a landscape. Okay. From this characterization of photography, some theorists have concluded that photographic content is constrained by the particular real object that gave rise to the image, and consequently they claim photography is fictionally incompetent. Here are two paradigmatic defenses of this view, which I will call the fictional incompetence of photography, FIP. The relation between a photograph and its subject is a causal relation. The photograph lacks that quality of intentional existence which is characteristic of painting. The ideal photograph, therefore, is incapable of representing anything unreal. With regard to the choice of subject matter, the photographer, unlike the painter or sculptor or poet, is limited to a particular real or existing object or state of affairs. It is usually said as a consequence that traditional photography is fictionally incompetent. That is, it is a medium necessarily incapable of representing a fictional character or state of affairs. This view has been rejected by various authors. One line of defense has been to argue that there are modes of representation available to photography other than the physical portrayal of its source. According to Gregory Curie, for instance, photographs characteristically represent a certain subject or event by registering the presence of the subject or event, the source that once stood before the lens. This way of representing, Curie maintains, is the only one that is specifically photographic. Yet this does not prevent photographs from representing fictional events or entities by other means. It is possible, for instance, that a photograph of a real subject, the source of the photo, is used to represent another. So while the photographs cannot represent fictions by source, by origin, or by strictly photographic means, Curie maintains they certainly can do so by use. Noel Carroll makes a similar argument with respect to cinematic works, claiming that there are various modes of representation in films. The shots of a photographic film will always physically portray the concrete particulars that caused the image, but this is by no means the only possible use of shots, nor is it necessarily the essential and most important one. The photographic shot also depicts a member of a class describable by a general term. So a photograph of, say, Clark Gable also represents a man, and this second mode in a relevant context opens up other possibility of cinematic representation, that is what Carroll calls nominal portrayal. The nominal portrayal occurs when a shot represents a particular person, object, or event different than its photographic provenance due to its context as a result of factors like commentary, titles, an ongoing story, or editing. According to Carroll and Curie, then, a photograph or cinematic shot that physically portrays Charlie Chaplin, a real person, by source can also nominally represent Charlotte, a fictional character, by use. So who is the actor when they're acting? Is the question here. If you take a picture of an actor acting on, like, say, a stage, acting as Hamlet, are you taking a picture of Hamlet, or are you taking a picture of the actor? And yeah, so it's like you can be a man, like they just said here, which is not necessarily the man, the actor. You could just be representing a generic man at that point. So yeah, there seems like even in the photography, it's less clear what the actual object being photographed is at that point. Like, you can be photographing a man, or you can be photographing that particular man, but a particular is not the same as this generic. And so I think this is a pretty solid point that in photography, the instance of what you're photographing is hard to actually pin down. So particular instances are unclear because they're not actual objects anymore. You've sort of lost that in the photograph. Okay, continuing. Please let me know if anyone has any questions, or if I'm not making any sense. Certainly, Curie and Carroll agree subjects differ subjects differ, don't know what that meant, when it comes to representation, even by use. Differ suitably when it comes to representation, even by use. As Carroll puts it is hard to imagine how a clean medium shot of Lenin can depict an ice cream soda. However, there are certain effective ways of reducing what Curie calls representational dissonance, that is, methods by which the viewer's attention can be directed away from the subject represented by source while making the object represented by use more salient. Given the right conditions, then, Carroll and Curie contend photographs can represent fictional entities. Now, although these arguments might be right and eventually convince us that the representation of fictional objects is indeed a possibility open to photography, it is not clear that they respond effectively to the challenge raised by those who endorse FIP. If FIP were simply a question of whether or not photographs can represent fictional entities, or even simpliciter, these arguments would these arguments would surely be enough to appease the skeptic. However, advocates of FIP do not deny that photographs can be used to represent fictions in the sense similar to that suggested by Curie and Carroll. Of course, quote, "Of course I may take a photograph of a draped nude and call it Venus, but insofar as this can be understood as an exercise in fiction, it should not be thought of as a photographic representation of Venus, but rather as the photograph of a representation of Venus." In other words, the process of fictional representation occurs not in the photograph, but in the subject. It is a subject which represents Venus. The photograph does no more than disseminate its visual character to other eyes. So this is what I was saying about, like, if you take a video or a picture of a play, this is saying, look, you're not taking a picture of Hamlet, you're taking a picture of a representation of Hamlet. Okay. The charge against photography raised by FIP's advocates seems to be stronger. What they deny photography is the capacity to represent fictions by photographic means, that is, through the relevant causal relation of a source, a particular object, with the camera lens, or the photosensitive surface. In this sense, Curie and Carroll's proposal does not offer a solution. In fact, even Curie agrees with FIP advocates that photographs cannot represent fictions by strictly photographic means. You know, what's interesting here is I'm thinking about this is like, well, look, so what are we taking a picture of then? And it seems like the sort of received view is that we have a very, very clear understanding of what we're photographing is. I'm less certain that we actually understand what things are when we photograph them. Like, we have an understanding of people and things in, like, everyday life. But once we start photographing, are those things the same things at that time? Like, it's assuming that Clark Gable remains Clark Gable when we photograph him. But why? Like, I'm not entirely... It seems like the assumption of photography as a completely transparent thing seems to me just false. And so the idea that you can maintain the identity of the thing being photographed just seems wrong to me. Even though I get the point that look, it's just some sort of chemical process or now electronic process that's happening meant to maintain fidelity of the object, but still that's a process that is being undergone. And so the idea that even that you're getting that object, I don't know what that object even is to begin with. How sure are you of all the objects in the world? I'm not. I'm really not. And so this is source of a lot of my confusions. But it's why should photography be a transparent thing where it's just sort of it doesn't modify the world in any way? Okay. 2. Photographic means. Certainly, the charge that advocates of FIP raise against photography holds true in one trivial sense. No one, not even realist about fictional characters, would maintain that fictional entities reflect or emit light. So it is obviously true that there cannot be photographs of ficta in their limited way, for ficta cannot causally interact with a photosensitive material. Less obvious, however, is that their description exhausts all the possible photographic means by which photographs can represent ficta. Yeah. Now, in order to see what other photographic means there are available, we need to review our conception of the photographic process. Standard philosophical accounts of photography have generally provided an oversimplified view of the photographic practice. By overemphasizing the distinctive capacity of photographs to record the pro-filmic scene without presuppositioning intentionality, theorists have often failed to account for how this record becomes an actual visual image. An alternative and perhaps more comprehensive account of photographic practice would need to account for the process between the moment light is impressed on the photosensitive material and the moment when the viewer experiences the photograph. Developing such an account in detail is beyond the scope of this article. However, drawing partially on the work of Don Phillips, I aim to say enough about the photographic process to justify the claim that there is an alternative, broader conception of photographic means that allows for the photographic representation of ficta. Producing a photograph is a complex process that normally requires more than the exposure of photosensitive material to a particular scene reflecting light. Certainly this event, which Phillips calls the photographic event, is crucial. It is at this stage that the pattern of light is registered. Pattern of light is the photographic event, and then we've got this pattern of light. What the heck is a pattern of light? I mean, seriously, everything's a pattern of light. That doesn't represent any object. And so it's yeah, something's happening here. And it this makes sense first pass, but the second pass when it hits me, I'm what the heck is a pattern of light? Everything is a pattern of light. So, hey, what's up, Aristotle? Thanks for the lurk, I appreciate it. Yeah. It's just me being you get to see me being more of a curmudgeon. I'm what is a pattern of light? Someone tell me what a pattern of light is. And how something is not a pattern of light. Alright, continuing. However, this is by no means exhausts the whole process. In fact, as Phillips correctly indicates, at this point there is not yet a visual image. The impression of the light of the pattern of light is still latent. That is, a further exposure to light or to another light reflecting scene will change the current pattern or ultimately fog or saturate the photosensitive surface. Lurk squad. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the lurks. Everyone go lurk. Well, you don't have to lurk, but thank you for lurking. Lurk squad, rise up. So, the photosensitive material has to go through the further process to 1, turn the recorded information into one or many patent, or actually visible images. Let us call this transduction. And 2, fix or preserve the pattern created by the impression of light. Let us call this storing. It is only when all these processes are completed that we can speak of the existence of a photograph. Phillips calls our attention to a couple of things worthy of note. First, the various processes taking place in the production of the photograph may vary a great deal. Consequently, the information recorded might result in a final photographic image whose appearance turns out to be very different from the appearance of the profilmic scene or object. Second, the fact that all processes involved in the production of the photograph can be mechanically or automatically performed does not mean that this is always the case. We do not have reason in principle to believe that if those actions are performed non-mechanically, the process ceases to be photographic. Yeah, this is the issue. It's like, how are we actually, what the heck is actually going on in the camera? And like, why? And that's why should that process, how exacting are we that process that this camera action is actually saving the world in like a high fidelity way? And if you switch out the camera for some other process, we might not think that, like, say we had like some wizard or magician who was doing this. And we might think, well, we don't know what that process is, but it always produces photographs. But then if we have like a magical photographer, then someone who so at the end of course, Ghostbusters 2, the painting is magically produced with the Ghostbusters on it. After they get Vigo, they banish Vigo out of our dimension. The Ghostbusters are then, the representation of them is then somehow magically imported into the painting. Say there was some like magic process there. Why would we think that that process was any less true than the camera? And you see, that's the problem here. It's giving the camera some magical ability to save the world, and that's not to represent the world, like to save in like the computer saving sense, not to like save us from ourselves. To record the world in an accurate way, but we don't actually understand that. I mean, we're just assuming it because of some sort of conditioning of the way we understand our technology. So then we get this question of what is the technology, and that is a problem because the philosophy of technology is complex. Okay, continuing. Now, it seems to me that when authors talk about photographic means, they assume that the first stage of the photographic process is the only one that deserves to be called strictly photographic, since it is presumably at this stage the relevant causal relation of a source, a particular object with the camera lens or photosensitive surface, is instantiated. But why should we think this? FIP theorists have not given us any reason as to why this first stage, conceived of as they do, should set the boundaries of our conception of photographic means. As a matter of fact, one could argue that if the description of the photographic process I developed above is correct, up to the first stage of the process there is not yet a visual image. So a relevant question, I think, is to ask why we should exclude, for instance, what happens in the darkroom as a photographic means. After all, it is then, or then, that in many instances the latent image becomes the visual image we can appropriately call a photograph. Moreover, a great many of the processes taking place in the darkroom can be said to be specific to photography or strictly photographic. You also should think that we're used to seeing photographs in a certain way. Like, they're usually only like so big, or like, you know, they're big to they have a certain ratio, I guess you could say, that like we're used to looking at a photograph in a way that, like, you know, you got like the video on your screen right now. It's in a like certain little box. It might be on your phone, so it's like this big. It might be on a screen, so it's like, you know, it's a bit bigger. But like, we're used to seeing that. And then if you see like a mural, like, it might be big, but it's to a certain scale. Now, is it Chuck Close who makes giant portraits of people? And so it's a little weird because it's these very high quality, these big. Hey, Evan, what's up? How you doing? So you see like these really big pictures of like people's faces, but like they're huge, and there's something like different about it because we don't see human heads at the scale that the art then is showing to us, that those pictures are showing to us. And so in some sense, I bet this is where the author is going, but like the process of getting the picture out of the world into the camera has definitely is like sort of not thought of in terms of the right scaling to get from the picture to like the photograph that's too big. Oh, cool. Stay clean there, Evan. Or don't, whatever. Have fun in the shower. Yeah. Are you going to go for a different hair color? Maybe you will. Okie dokie. Alright, continuing. Certainly not all actions performed in the darkroom exploit strictly photographic techniques, where photographic techniques means any action consisting solely in the exploitation, manipulation, or control of the incident of light onto and its interaction with photosensitive material. Scratching or physically drawing on the film surface, for instance, may not be strictly photographic processes, for they exploit means different from the manipulation of light and its properties in order to create an image or parts of an image. However, drawing with light using, say, a flashlight or a light pencil is indeed a photographic process. Likewise, physically cropping some parts of an image with scissors may not count as a photographic technique, but using a template to selectively mask the relevant parts of the image will surely count. Other methods that employ strictly photographic techniques could be selective over and under exposure, combining negatives, burning or blurring parts of the image, manipulation of contrast, and the use of filters, various types of photosensitive papers, and developing liquids to vary quality of the image. It seems to me perfectly reasonable to consider these techniques as a photographic means, for, after all, what they exploit is not any contingent aspect of photography, but its very essence, the action of light on photosensitive material. In view of this, we may want to consider an alternative notion of photographic means, which could be the following. Photographic means any action or technique performed or taking place during the production of an image, including the stages of transduction and storing, that consists solely in the exploitation, manipulation, or control of the incident of light onto and its active interaction with a photosensitive material. Notice that I am not talking about digital manipulation, which arguably in some cases may not be considered strictly photographic because 1, it may be a case of post-production, and 2, it may alter the image by technical means different from the projection and recording of light. Yet this is not the case with analog photography, where there is a long-standing tradition of editing and working on prints and negatives using strictly photographic methods while the photographic image is being produced. Yes and no. I mean, I think the author is fair to make this point that the digital somehow is coming after the data is already stored. Digital manipulation, in some sense, it already has to be converted to like ones and zeros to be digitally manipulated to change the digits. But of course, digital cameras are still subject to all these things before that. And then you have to talk about how is the light on photosensitive, the chips. And you could talk about that sort of thing. Now, I don't know enough about how digital cameras work to talk about any of that. But of course, I'm sure there's an infinite amount of like learning that had an effort that's gone into making digital cameras work, and so all of that, like that completely different sort of engineering process, would count just as the analog process does count. Now, these photographic techniques mentioned above, which require a high degree of skill and knowledge about the photographic process, can be used either to make corrections for purposes of composition or for other creative or deceptive purposes, such as representing ficta. Figure 1 is a photographic image that represents a hybrid creature. Ooh, we've got a hybrid creature. Cool. A Catwoman, we can call it, or the transformation of the photographer Wanda Woltz into a feline. The Catwoman or Wanda Woltz's feline alter ego clearly does not exist. Can we not say that This photograph represents a fictional entity by photographic means. I think we can. So let's see if we got a picture. Aha! There we go. That's awesome. Catwoman. Right there. I think we can. After all, the Catwoman that we can see in the picture was created by using multiple exposure techniques. That is, either by combining two negatives, one showing where am I? That's combined. One showing the face of a cat and the other the face of a woman to produce one single image, or by exposing one single negative twice. This is sound, and if this is sound, and there can be certain actions performed during the production of a photograph other than those considered by FIP that count as strictly photographic, then we have an alternative way in which photographs can be said to represent fictional entities by photographic means. I think the point here is that the method is, you would have to completely restrict the method of photograph production to only to be one single thing, to say that it is a factive, not a fictive, a factive medium of photography, that there is no fiction. The problem is, if you ever did that, then there'd be, like, I'm sure there'd be some way to, like, someone would bastardize that, or undermine that one way. So it seems like, especially in the analog, since so many things had to go into it, that you can always find one other way to tweak the sort of method to make it in a way to spoil the factive nature and to make it fictive. So, yeah. So because it's a multi-step process, and you can't just limit it to one narrow understanding of how the process of photography works, there's always something you could be doing that will change the world, the way you see the world as strictly a fact, into one that could also be to one that could show a fiction. Yeah. And I have no reason to think that this would not also work with the digital, because the digital is also, in some sense, there's a process going on. It happens to be a very different technological process that is working in the digital chip, but it's still a process. There's nothing immediate about that. Okay, objections and answers. The skeptic might accept that. The skeptic might accept that the Catwoman image is fictionally competent. However, she may deny that it is a photograph, claiming instead that it should be classified as another pictorial type closer to, if not completely analogous with, painting or drawing. Scruton himself suggests this when he says that if a photographer proceeds to paint things out or in, alter or pasticher as he pleases, the photographer has now become a painter. The argument will then be that the following: photographs are fictionally incompetent, FIP, and Iogato is fictionally competent, so Iogato is not a photograph. But this argument clearly begs the question. Photographs, the argument assumes, are fictionally incompetent, and if a picture is fictionally competent, then it is not a photograph. The conclusion is only true if we assume that FIP is true. Without any further reason for why we should take images such as Iogato as non-photographic, this objection is not acceptable. But are there further reasons to think that Iogato is indeed a photograph? I think there are. Let me briefly mention two. The Catwoman image is consistent with the main claims traditionally made about the nature of photography. First, it is still a trace of the objects that produced it. It registers the presence of its sources. Moreover, being aware of this fact is important for the understanding of the image. Even those in sympathy with the thesis that photographs are transparent can accept that one can still literally see the cat and the woman through the photographs. Yeah, see, this is the word I was thinking about before. Photographs are transparent, or photography is. Oh, this is doing the whole row. So, that it's transparent. And what I like about this is that it's it has to be wrong in the very, very naive sense that photographs are not transparent. They have to be opaque, or else you can't see them. So it is funny that, like, the whole concept that is conceptually transparent, meaning that it doesn't actually affect anything that is going on in between you and the world, just is it has to be patentedly false. It just has to be literally false. It can't possibly be true because, like, a map is not an actual representation of the world because it's small. A photograph is not a representation of the world because it's a picture. It can't be the actual object. Even if you take a picture of a picture, then it's not the original picture. So it's like this transparency thing is always going to have to be explained. Okay. Second, in order to produce the picture, the photographer was constrained by a particular real or existing object or state of affairs in a way, and here we go, is Cat Lady. And this is a cool one. 1932, very impressive for, like, figuring this out back in the day. Because, like, this could have been posted on the internet this morning, and people would have been like, if no one had done this before, they would have, like, lost their minds. They would have been like, this is the coolest picture ever made. Okay, what was the sentence? Second, in order to produce the picture, the photographer was constrained by a particular real or existing object or state of affairs in a way that a painter would never have been. Indeed, the composition of the image depends crucially on the amount of light the different parts of the scene reflect on the photosensitive surface. What's up, Bubba Bloop? Oh, thank you for the subscription. I appreciate it. Got the little duck rabbit. I'm so happy with the duck rabbit. I actually added more emotes, but they're not any good. I have to find some better emotes or think of something. Yeah. So we'll figure it out. But thank you again, and good to see you, Bubba Bloop. How are you doing today? So, it is the task of the skilled photographer to control this element in order to obtain the desired image. Third, the fact that certain photographs, such as this one, presuppose intentionality or belief-mediated counterfactual dependence is consistent with the view that photographs and paintings differ substantially in that the former, but not the latter, can represent objects or events in the absence of intentionality or without mediation of the artist's beliefs. Well, have a good dinner. The second reason that Iogato is interesting precisely because it is a photographic image and not a painting. A painting of similar creatures would certainly not surprise the spectator, but the fact that it is a photograph arguably does. Barbara Savedoff, cool name, Savedoff, wonder what a doff is, explains this phenomenon nicely. As experienced spectators, she claims we concede certain epistemic authority to photographs, and this prompts us to identify the objects that were once in front of the camera. But when confronted with photographs such as our Catwoman, we feel a certain tension. Although we identify the objects that caused the image, we see them presented in uncanny ways. This tension has a positive effect and makes our appreciation of the photographs representing ficta different from our appreciation of paintings with similar content. If this is so, evaluating Iogato as a painting would be to miss the whole point of the picture. Yeah, in some sense, the fact that you can kind of see that this is a photograph but not your typical photograph means that you're evaluating it with the photography in mindset. Even though, as I was saying earlier, there's so much that goes into photography, and as the author was saying, you still have some idea about what that there was something outside the person that just sort of recorded the world. And so the fact that it's farther from the artist's intentionality, that sort of gives you a different perspective on what's going on here. Okay. The skeptic will perhaps now concede that the picture is a photograph, but she still may insist that, strictly speaking, it does not depict a Catwoman photographically, rather it depicts the two objects, a woman's face and a cat. This, I take it, is no more than a sophisticated version of the former objection, for it suggests the following argument. Photographs can only represent their sources photographically. Iogato is a photograph, but there is no Catwoman causally related to the image. Rather, a particular woman and a particular cat are the sources of the image. Therefore, Iogato photographically represents only a particular woman and a particular cat. Again, this argument is question-begging. It assumes that the only way photographs are able to represent is by source, by being causally related to the object thereof. And if the picture represents any other objects that was not the picture's source, then such representation cannot be photographic. In other words, the argument is true only if FIP is true, but this is precisely what is being questioned. Now, it might be correct to say that photographs have distinctive have a distinctive way of representing objects that other pictures lack. Unlike other pictures, there is a sense in which photographs always represent what they are of. However, this does not mean that this is the only way by which photographs can depict their objects, or that other ways of representing available to photography are necessarily not photographic. Yeah, see, this is the thing. What is the technology here? They have a distinctive way. It's a technological way of representing objects. It's something separate from ourselves that just sort of does it, and we think that it is capturing something of reality. But I mean, why? Why is light getting bent through glass or like lenses of some sort? Why does that keep it real? I mean, clearly it's not real. It's being bent through glass. I don't know. Understanding Iogato may require that we identify the woman's face and the cat as the sources, but also, crucially, it requires us to see one single whole creature in the picture that we can easily identify as Catwoman. Now, in order for us to identify or see a Catwoman in the picture, we do not need a label or a convention that tells us what the picture depicts, as in the case of the Chaplin picture representing Charlotte. Rather, in the case of Iogato, we only need to look at the image to naturally generate an interpretation of a single object whose visual properties or shapes can easily be associated with a creature that we may be led to call a Catwoman. Such properties, moreover, can be seen in the picture due to the manipulation of some specifically photographic techniques. Champions of FIP might still want to leave the particular case of Iogato aside and take issue with the general framework that I used to characterize the photographic process that all allowed me to extend the notion of photographic means. They may argue, for instance, that while it might be the case that some photographs are produced non-automatically, following the processes described above, such photographs move away from the essence of photography or from the ideal photograph, which is really what they are concerned with. A similar or perhaps more sophisticated version of this objection claims that the process I described above, where the photographic event is just one stage of a more complex process, is only a historical contingency and so does not capture the essential elements of photography. After all, there could be photographic images produced in a different way where the second and third steps described above, transduction and storing, for instance, work differently or were not present. Hence, one could object that what I take to be genuine photographic means are not so because they are not essential to photography. In answer to the first worry, a reasonable response would be, I think, to ask why we should accept that non-automatically produced photography is less essential than its automatic counterpart, and also why achieving automatism should be a desirable goal of photography. Yeah, it's like, how would you actually make photography automatic? I mean, and why would you want to, of course, as the author asks. I mean, how and why? Without such an explanation, the objection is ad hoc. The objection is ad hoc. As for the second version of the objection, even if the objector were right and the process described above were only a historical contingency, this would not cancel the existence of a distinctive photographic process that necessarily requires these steps to produce a photographic image. Moreover, my claim is not that these purported extra steps are themselves essential to photography, but that when they are present, they are still part of the production of the image. More importantly, that some actions performed therein exploit something that is indeed essential to photography, namely the incident of light onto and its interaction with photosensitive material. Yeah, see, the thing is, like, if you have like a magician making photographs, they still need a process. It does not happen instantaneously because that would be even weirder than like what is being said here. You can't like instantaneously make something out of nothing. I mean, that would be a very impressive magic trick. But like, even if the magician is making like photographs magically, there's still like a magic spell. There's still something there. Otherwise, it would be even farther away from our reality. Okay. As a last resort, advocates of FIP may try to claim that their position is stronger than I take it to be. Thus, the relevant causal relation of a source with the lens or the photosensitive surface that they take to define photographic means would involve the exposure of a single continuous photosensitive surface by a bundle of light from a single spatio-temporally connected scene. If this were so, the case of Iogato would not count as a representation of a fictional character by photographic means. So here's we got another cool picture. You can see the might as well use it. Like this sort of old style. You got this columned building coming out of a tree stump here, in what looks like, a reasonably modern town here. I mean, this is not an old building, but like you've got like some like this is like modern construction here. Cool. How was your shower, Evan? A preliminary reaction to this revised version of FIP would be to ask again what the motivation for such a restrictive account is. Yeah, why would you want to tie photographs to the physics of like packets? Trying to do a no poo. I wonder what a no poo is. Is that like a shampoo? Or like do you have to like poo before shower so you get clean and then not poo after your shower so you don't mess up your shower? But it doesn't sound like a shampoo. It's strange not to use shampoo, but apparently it's better for your hair. I don't always use shampoo. Just like I try not to go like overboard on my shampoo. My hair is very happy for it. So yeah, I'm actually a not always shampoo sort of person. I mean, you don't want to go too long, because then you just get greasy. And although greasy is possibly the most natural state of streamers on Twitch, I learned that from the streamer 3Moth, who is an excellent streamer. Everyone should go check out 3Moth if you're into chill vibes and heavy metal music, and Diablo 2 and Darkest Dungeon. But your friend who dyed your hair says you shouldn't do it. Yeah, because it might mess up your hair. Yeah, dyeing your hair does, can screw stuff up. So you have to be careful. But, shampoo is my uncle always said the thing was, the day someone realized it says shampoo and then says repeat if necessary on the bottle, made the shampoo companies, millions of dollars. There's no reason to ever repeat shampooing your hair, but the idea that you could get someone to use the product twice made them millions of dollars, because now they're going through it twice as fast. So yeah, what color are you going to go for next? Or are you just going to let it grow out again? Not going to do purple? Alright, we'll get back to the philosophy now. Okay, yeah, so why would you restrict photography to the packets of light being bent from the picture onto it? Because then you lose the object too once you get that small. Yeah, how would that? Yeah, once you get to the physics level, you lose any notion of objects on the other side, because the packets of light have nothing to do with the actual objects that you're photographing. There's a pattern there again, but what's the pattern? Okay. Moreover, the view does not seem to sit well with the way we classify and appreciate photographs. I already mentioned the case of Iogato, but the objector should also explain why other images obtained using techniques such as multiple exposure and combination printing, such as Elias Fawn's Duchamp descending a staircase. Do we have that? Okay, no. Or Jerry Ulsmann's Untitled 1982 Figure 2. So that's this one here. This combined image, it looks like. Should not be considered strictly photographic when both the techniques and the resulting images are part and parcel of the history of photography and its practice. It is also worth noting that although this restrictive conception of photographic means seems tailored to rule out cases such as Iogato as an example of fictional representation by photographic means, it is not all clear that it will exclude other cases obtained by using techniques such as long exposure. Take, for example, Gon Millie's photograph of Picasso drawing a centaur. One could argue that this picture depicts both Picasso and the centaur, a fictional entity, and that both representations qualify as photographic. They would certainly be photographic representations in my sense, but the proposed revised version of FIP will not rule out this possibility either. After all, the center that can be seen in the photograph was produced by a long exposure of a single continuous photosensitive surface by a bundle of light radiating from a light pencil from a single spatio-temporally connected scene, Picasso's studio. Yeah, see, this is the thing. Once you start defining formal restrictions on what people do, ever since way back in the day, someone finds a way around it. This is the classic. Plato was defining man as a featherless biped, and Diogenes comes along, plucks a chicken, and be like, "Behold, a man," and it's a plucked chicken. And then Plato had to come back and say, "Okay, it's a featherless biped with broad nails," because chickens have pointy nails. And so it's like, but this is the sort of thing that's happening. You can almost always spoil a formal restriction when you're when you're outside the formal realm. If you're talking about math and logic on its own, yes, you can have your formal definitions. But once you start trying to get out of the formal realm, the formal definitions quite often can always be spoiled. And so this is what's happening here. You can always find another very clever artist that has done something to modify the picture. And so you could even do this with the digital one. I'm sure there's techniques to get the light into a digital camera that glitches the digital camera out, and then you're gonna have everything that the author here is saying is happening in the analog case, you could have in the digital case. It'll look very different, but it'll be, again, in the process of one photon hitting the light sensor, but you hit the light sensor in a way that was not sort of the right way, the technical right way. But how is that technicality the thing? What's up to Marshall? Long time no see. I'm sorry I haven't been broadcasting as much. I had a very busy few weeks. Hope you're doing well. How are you today? We're talking, this was a request from Semiotics to do an aesthetics paper on photography. Oh, cool. Oh yeah, you can stream from other devices. That's neat. That's cool. So I'm on the PlayStation. I never thought I'd make it. Oh, I made it to the PlayStation. Cool. Okay. Yeah, so, and then this is, another technical way around stuff. Alright, concluding this section. It might well be that the objector has good reason to revise both our appreciative and classificatory practices, but in the absence of any further justification, one should prefer a more open conception of photographic means, one that is in accordance with the way we appreciate and classify photographs. I believe that I provided this alternate conception. Wait, I said something about the lining the formal and informal logic limiting. Yeah, so what I was saying here is that they're talking about giving a formal definition of what counts as proper photography. But the problem is, we've got super creative people out here, and there's things that they have done that count as the formal definition of photography, but wouldn't count as what the intention behind that definition is, to only capture an actual object in some sort of factual way, and not one of these fictional ways. And I want to say you have to be careful, though. You can't do that when you're talking about things that are not formal. In formal terms, you can make very clear distinctions in math and logic, and that is what you're talking about. And there is no way around it, because once you're in that sort of formal system, then you're limited to following those rules. So once you're in a formal system, you agree to that, you're in that formal system, and that's okay. But you can get around them, but then you've changed your formal system. Here we're talking about the practice of photography, which is not a formal system. And so the author here is arguing, say, hey, look, we don't know what photography is. It is kind of what we want. And any of these artificial restrictions that people are putting on it, it's ad hoc and begging the question. And that's not the same as when you're in a logic and you can define your terms. In photography, there's no defining terms because it's a human practice. And if we're talking about math and logic, sometimes there's other reasons, technical reasons that you can't do certain things. And so it's okay to restrict yourself according to those the logical or mathematical reasons. You might have in classical logic you don't have contradictions. Now you can get out of that, but that's a big argument. Here we've got photography, and it's well, you're photographing this stuff weird to make a fictional thing. It says, well, so what? Like, what do you mean? Who's to say the right way to photograph anything is? I mean, but at least in math and logic, there's other reasons you can go to. Yeah, and you got it, DeMarshall. So, cool. All right. From being fictionally competent to being fictional. So far, I have... and everyone feel free to ask questions, too. Like DeMarshall, everyone else, Evan. It's cool. So far, I have argued that there is an alternative conception of photographic means that allows us to say against FIP that photography is indeed fictionally competent. Curie and Carroll showed us how photography can represent fictive entities by use, and if my arguments are sound, it can also do so by photographic means. Notice that once our conception of photographic means is expanded, we can also see how photography can depict not only ficta, but also fictive events by photographic means. Fictive events, moreover, do not necessarily contain fictive entities. Well, I appreciate that, Evan. It's cool. No offense taken. Consider the infamous photograph in Figure 4, which represents an event that never occurred, at least not as depicted. It is, therefore, a fictive time slice. The actual scene to have once taken place before the camera included the presence of P.J. Goebbels. So yeah, this is you can see, guy is here, and he's not here. He got airbrushed out of this one. So, famous propaganda where Goebbels just got disappeared. Could this photograph have been made by strictly photographic means? Yes, I think it could. The photographer could have subtly blocked the light selectively over the figure of Goebbels in first exposure and subsequently projected other sections of the negative over the underexposed part of the photosensitive surface in order to fill the deleted areas, all this before developing or making the image patent on the photosensitive paper. If this is right, then photographs can indeed represent not only ficta, but also fictive events by photographic means. Yeah, this is one of these ways of spoiling what we consider to be the proper what the FIP people were considering to be the proper way of photographing the world. Now, could we conclude that since certain photographs represent fictive entities or events, they are fictional works or instances of fictional as opposed to documentary photography? Yeah, this is sort of the term you want to get to. That real photography is somehow a documentary of the world. I do not think so. Not that I have said here shows this, nor does it explain how a photograph becomes fictional. Up until this point, I have argued that photographs can represent fictive or fictive events, but contrary to what I suspect may be in some readers' minds, representing ficta and fictive events does not make a photograph fictional, no more so, at least, than reference to fictional characters makes a text or sentence fictional. Yeah, like a picture of Santa Claus does not make the picture a fiction. It's a picture of Santa Claus, though. Here it is useful to remember that the distinction that is commonly made between the representational dimension of a work and its functional or genre dimension. Very schematically, the representational dimension, which can be referential or otherwise, tells us what the content of the work is, what is that the work represents. The genre dimension which is logically independent from the representational, in turn informs us about the kind of work it is, under which category it falls, and the function it performs. It is this dimension that indicates to the audience members the relevant attitude that they are supposed to take toward the work's representational content. It is the genre dimension and not the representational dimension that determines whether a work is fictional or non-fictional. Yeah, see, if you take a picture of like your kid sitting on Santa's lap, the genre of having like a mall Santa picture is kind of what's going on there, and you understand that like even though that you've got a picture of Santa, you're not, the picture itself is true. It's like it's just sitting there. It's a documentary, as I said before, the word is documentary. It's a document representing what happened when you went to the mall, basically. According to the orthodox approach to this matter, a work is fictional if it requires the audience to make believe or imagine that what is represented, regardless of whether it is a fictional or real entity or event, while non-fictional or documentary works ask the audience to believe the content of the work, again, regardless of it being fictional or real. Yeah, see, you have to know what the attitude is towards the picture with Santa. If this distinction applies to works of... Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. I haven't streamed enough. If this distinction applies to literature and films, there does not seem to be any reason, in principle, to think that it should not be valid for depictive works in general and photographic works in particular. If this is right, then not all photographs that represent fictive or fictive events are necessarily instances of fictional photography. Likewise, not all photographs that represent real entities are necessarily documentaries. In order for them to be either fictional or non-fictional, we need them to have a relevant function that indicates to the audience the pertinent attitude they should take toward the work's representative content. Take, for instance, the case of a still photograph of the making of a film in which one of the fictional characters is entirely computer-generated and projected holographically in 3 dimensions on the pro-filmic scene. The photograph is aimed at as evidence of the shooting process, and which we see in it is, say, part of the original set where the film was shot and the holographic figure projected on site. This photograph presumably depicts a fictional character, although not strictly by photographic means, and yet since its function is to make us believe something about the shooting process, it is not an instance of fictional photography. Yeah, it's an instance of trying to be a documentary photography. But you can see this like in the propaganda example right here. This is meant to be a documentary photograph. Like, it's supposed to document the scene, and it takes out a person. And so this, in some sense, is supposed to be a documentary thing and not supposed to be a fictional thing, even though it is using the fiction. It's creating a different reality. So, more controversial, perhaps, is the case of deceptive photography. Okay, so we're going to discuss that right here. Deceptive photography, such as the Hitler without Goebbels image. As I have said, this image represents a fictive or non-veridical event, something that never happened as such, and yet its function is to make the audience believe that the fictive representational content. That is, it is asking us to believe that Goebbels was not present at that precise moment in time. The same will be true of other photographs that represent fictive entities, either by use or by photographic means, such as in the following examples. 1. A photograph that I take while climbing the Himalayas of a real person wearing a furry, bulky outfit on a snowy, windy day, which I subsequently managed to sell to a magazine as proof of the existence of the abominable snowman. 2. A photograph of the Loch Ness Monster, supposing this photograph has been made, as I think it could have been, by photographic means. Again, as in the case of the Hitler without Goebbels photograph, the function of these two images is to make the audience believe that what was represented, namely the fictive entity, was in a particular place at a particular moment. Hence, given their function, it is reasonable to say that these photographs are non-fictional, even if they depict fictive entities or events. If this is right, these would be other examples of photographs that represent ficta and yet are non-fictional. And they're non-fictional in the sense that they're meant to be documentary. But this is talking about the intention of the audience towards what the intended intention of the audience viewing the photo should be. So, it can be claimed, however, that non-fictional or documentary photographic works should only be those that really represent what they claim to represent. You see, now we're getting into this. What is the intention of the work itself, almost not even the person who made the photograph, but what should the image itself intend to show? If we are told that a photograph depicts a subject or event, it has to be that exact event or subject that caused the photograph. Hence, deceptive photography works should not be classified as non-fictional. Rather, they fit more comfortably in the category of fiction. Yeah. A proper response to this objection will require advancing a definition of documentary works that I cannot provide here. However, let me try to sketch some reasons I hope I hope can help to make my position plausible. One reason is that characterizing photographic, non-fictional, or documentary works in the way suggested conflates the ontological question, what are photographic, non-fictional, or documentary works, with the epistemic question, how successful are they in conveying truth. The problem with this is that it does not allow for there being defective documentary works, since only those that are good can be called documentary. But the history of documentary photography is replete with cases of deception. Oh man, what about the monkey photographing himself? Yeah, exactly, DeMarshall. What is actually intention? What is the actual truth? I think I mentioned this a lot very early on. Is that I have no idea what the truth of the world is, and so what are we actually photographing? I don't think we even know what reality is a lot of times. So the idea that we can nail this down, and the monkey that took the selfie, yeah, like of course. That's it. This is the exact problem. And this is what the thing is. The epistemic thing is how to know the knowledge, how successful what do we know about this, and what is the actual thing, the ontological question. So what you're saying is really related to this, but I think it's like a next level because we've got impossible intentions at that point. Okay. So, I mean, did the monkey actually understand that they were taking a photograph? They might have. I don't know how smart monkeys are. Maybe they do understand about pictures. I really don't know. Yeah, but like this is like really gonna be a hard case for anyone saying that you have to represent the world in a like veridical way. And this is what I'm talking about, the technology. What is the technology in the hands of a monkey? And do we understand our technology only when it's in our hands and when we know what we're doing? Like, that's a real tough question. Okay, continuing. We're almost done right here. It's the last page. The last column, I should say. Another reason is that the fact that deceitful photography raises criticisms only makes sense if we acknowledge that its function is to make us believe something about the work's representational content. Being deceitful or false is not typically an appropriate criticism of fictional works. If we are... You couldn't believe my friend who studied law and mentioned court will decide some cases on intention. Oh, yeah. I mean, what was that? You have to, like, a vicious will. Like, isn't that the whole, like, thing in, like, criminal case? Like, was there a vicious will? I have no idea. It's very hard to establish intention, like, state of mind, and that always seems like a big thing. So, if we are informed that, say, the photograph of Dr. Dwanna's famous magic act is part of Dwayne Meekal's series of fictional photography, it would certainly be misguided to criticize it just because it's not true and that there is a man emerging from a top hat. By contrast, well, that's sort of the way of the world too, DeMarshall. It's like, people are doing the best they can, but like, sometimes for some of that stuff, the philosophy of law, in that case, is extremely difficult. And you still want to say people screwed up and they should, like, you have to, like, make amends somehow. But, like, what do you do at that point? By contrast, to say that of a non-fictional work that it is false or deceitful is indeed a criticism. That is because the documentary genre sets those expectations. Notice that what sets the relevant expectations is not the fact that the work is photographic. It is true that we concede epistemic authority to photographs, but as experienced spectators, we also know that photographs can be put to various uses. We do not evaluate the photographic manipulation of the Hitler without Goebbels image as defective just because it is a photograph and therefore it should be accurate. There is nothing in the medium that dictates what its correct use should be. The medium is normatively neutral. Rather, we find the photograph defective because it invites us to believe what is depicted because we recognize it as non-fictional. If this same photograph were presented as fictional, our assessment of it would not be very different. The manipulation might not be considered a defect. Let me now briefly summarize what I have claimed in this article. I first addressed the discussion on the capacity of photographs to represent ficta. Against FIP theorists, I argue that if we take a more comprehensive view of the nature of photography and a broader notion of photographic means, then there is no reason to deny that photographs can represent ficta by photographic means. After addressing possible objections to my position, I argued that representing fictive entities does not make a photograph an instance of fictional photography. The categories of fiction and nonfiction or documentary, as they have been traditionally theorized, are not defined by the type of representational content of the image. Rather, they indicate the attitude the audience has to take toward the representational content. Finally, I suggested that deceptive photography is better understood as non-fictional photography, however defective. Yeah, so this is a fun article. I kind of like the analogy is like, look, with what I was talking about, like when you're talking about the real world, like non-formal topics, and you're trying to give formal definitions on or formal restrictions on what counts as like a certain thing, like what is photography and what is not photography, you run into difficulties because people find ways around that. And so you're asking like, well, which one of these is like the right photo? Well, they're both documenting a certain time and place. And what happened is this one is deceptive, but it's still the same sort of documentary work. And that's what the author here is saying. It's like you have to separate how the audience is viewing the art versus what the art actually is on itself. And you have to be careful about that. And then you get, as DeMarshall brought up, you've got the same sort of thing. What actually happened in terms of the law, the crime that was committed, and what was the intention of the people? Like who was actually harmed and what was actually the intentional act. So you're getting this in other areas too. And so this is like a complicated thing that that is just difficult. And so we're discussing here in the art, but as DeMarshall brings up, you've got like really similar stuff in legal cases too. So I completely agree with the author here that if you're going to like have a very narrow view of like photography as documentary, you're gonna have a bad time because people are creative and they find really interesting ways. And these are not new photographs. This is 1982, but we go back up here to 1932, and this is like a really well done like mashup of obviously The Cat and the Lady, but like that's kind of what it is. It's like she found a way to, get what people were thinking of as documentary as this sort of Catwoman. And so she was doing stuff in the way that photography works. She used it, and it wasn't like an after effect. It was like in the sort of the means, as the author said here. And so if you can use the means like within the formal definition, then you can find a way around the formal definition. Knowing epistemic stuff is hard. Trying to know intention is impossible and madness. Yeah. It depends what you're trying to get out of it. You hate using the word and that's all. Well, I actually avoid using words that I don't like in philosophy. And I make it work for me. Like, I just don't talk about certain topics because I don't understand what the words mean, or I don't like them in some sense. And so they're terrible, and I don't use them. One of the things is I don't talk about, like, nearness, epistemic nearness. I don't actually think that is... I know what people mean when they say, well, one world is closer than another world, but, like, I don't make any use of that in my thought. And, like, even though that's a very common sort of thing to say that some, like, possible world is closer to our world than a different possible world, I find that completely, like, I just never use the concept of nearness of possibilities. So it's like I just eliminate that. And so, and I do just fine without it. So I suggest if you don't like something, find a way around it, because you can. All right, does anyone have any questions? Time checking my intention. You open up your head, you look at what it says in there, and then you close your head. And that's how you find out what your intentions are. Yeah, so anybody have any questions on this? Let's see, how long are we going? Hour and a half. Might do that short paper right after this, just be for, shits and giggles. Okie dokie. So, hold on one sec. I'm just going to end stream, but everyone else you get your last chance to get your question in, and then we're going to move on to another paper. Cool.